here we are, Chole Wilde.
Oh, I can't believe this is actually happening. Like the fact that I'm sitting in front of you has actually been so many years in the making. I actually feel really guilty that you're here in my home and this is the first time we meet, because I have been recommended to you for so many years. It started off when I very publicly told everyone that I was like struggling so hard with period cramps every single month.
Yeah.
And people were like, go see Anne. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And then when I started publicly sharing about fertility, people were like, go see Anne. And I was just going through so much at that time, I couldn't fathom taking on an extra appointment. So this truly has been so many years in the making, and our paths were meant to be crossed. And now they're crossing right here on like my very comfy couch. The kid is sleeping just next to us. Like, this is beautiful. So thank you for coming into my home.
I'm really glad that you actually gave his location, because I was like, I was going to say, I was like, he's in the next room. And I was like, maybe that's, you know how people put stickers on their children's faces on Instagram? I was like, is that a breach?
No, I don't think it's a breach. It's not a breach. As long as you don't tell them exactly where I live.
No, I'll erase that story from Instagram. I was like, I'm approaching Chole Wilde's house now. It is approximately in the following directions. No, I won't. Don't worry. That didn't happen.
No, so this is pretty sick. And it's amazing because like you have been holding space for people, for women in particular, for so long. And I think podcasts are such a great way to share people's stories. But in order to share people's stories, like you have to be able to hold space in a way that people trust you. So I just feel really lucky to be here in front of you.
I thought it honestly was a big ask, because I feel like your story has been on the forefront of my mind because you have been publicly sharing. But something that happens a lot in fertility is that people will see the beginning point and then the end point, and the middle is sort of a blur. And something that I have happen a lot with my patients is their assumption is that something wasn't as challenging, or that someone hasn't gone through the same thing as what they have.
Yeah.
So I feel like you very much gave a middle, and now I'm just wanting to like hone in on the details because I'm a creep, and I'm a fertility creep, and I've creeped my way here. Just creeped my way into her home.
Favorite kind of creep.
That's what everyone wants to hear.
No, but you're right. Like I chose to share a lot about our fertility journey once we were pretty far along in our fertility journey.
Right.
Which, as someone who has absolutely, gosh, I'm such an open book. It was a very intentional choice to keep most of our fertility journey to ourselves, between my partner and I, not even letting our family in on what we were going through.
Yeah.
Until at a certain point, I think it was around 18, 20 weeks, that I started to feel a little bit more comfortable to share it. And plus, you know, before being on maternity leave, I was on a national show. I was starting to show the bump could no longer be concealed. So I had no choice but to come out and start to be public with it. So I was able to share a lot of that journey starting from that point. But as anyone who's listening to this who knows how hard it is to be going through fertility struggles, often even what you think is the beginning of someone's story is not even close, because usually the beginning starts years and years earlier, sometimes even when you're a teenager. So for me to have this, to share the beginning part is really new, because I don't think I've actually really ever talked about it before.
So we're getting Chole Wilde's original, is what you're telling me.
Get ready, everybody. And no, it's not that it's that. It's just a story, but it's something that ultimately changed our lives in a really beautiful way, but was the hardest thing I think I've ever gone through as an individual, the hardest thing my partner and I have ever gone through. And there were many times where we didn't know if we'd get to the finish line.
Right.
You know, I remember being young, you know, you get the sex ed talk, you get your period. I got mine really nice and early when I was 11. Right away, the doctors were like, let's put her on the pill, because, you know, my cramps were so bad. I was having to miss a lot of school. So talking about, you know, the idea of getting pregnant or not getting pregnant was something that I had those conversations when I was incredibly young, because I got it when I was 11. I was immediately put on birth control pill. So it was explained to me the purpose of this. And so I was very aware that sex could potentially lead to a baby at a very young age. And growing up, I remember being told many times by my mom, by society, by media, you know, wear a condom, don't get pregnant, don't forget your pill, you'll get pregnant. And it felt like all throughout my, older teenage years when I was sexually active into my 20s, I was terrified to get pregnant because at the time it wasn't the right time, place, and I wasn't with the right person. And I thought it was going to be, snap of the fingers. You don't wear the condom, you don't take the pill anymore, and voila, you're pregnant. And 9 months later, you have a baby. And it was looking back, it was so naive to look at it that way. But when you're just going through life, you're 18, 19 into your 20s, you don't know what you don't know. And at the time, not a lot of people in my life were trying to conceive. And if they did, it happened, relatively quickly. And so when my partner, Ben, and I decided, it was, the tail end of 2019, that we were ready and excited to have a family together, we, were wearing our naive hats, and we thought, this is going to be a breeze. You're healthy. I'm healthy. Let's go. Like, close the bedroom door. Let's have some fun. And out will come a baby.
Pretty much immediately.
Immediately, of course. Not even 9 months.
Yeah.
And, it was a very, very harsh, sobering reality to realize that even though we were very healthy individuals, even though we loved each other very much, even though we really wanted to have a baby, sometimes you can do all the right things, and yet there's something going on behind the scenes that you don't know until you start trying.
So what, in terms of, okay, we've had our fun, the bedroom door has remained closed, and now it's been how many months?
I am someone who likes things to move quickly.
Yes. Like that.
When I am filming at work, I like to do things in one take. I like to sign up to do a race and train for it and accomplish it, in a way that feels successful to me. I like to do things efficiently, effectively, and on my schedule.
Right.
And fertility had different plans. I had to really let go of that idea of control. So we started trying, and a couple months went by, and, still would get my period. And then for the next 7 days, I would be in bed with so much pain. And then on top of it, an emotional pain, and then have to show up and continue going to work. And I want to say, like, after 6 months or so, we started looking to them being like, okay, maybe we should start doing some research. And at that point, I hadn't done any research because, again, I was wearing my naive hat so proudly. Like, I thought it was going to be so easy that I hadn't really considered what my options would be, what my alternatives would be. And I also feel like the landscape around fertility and infertility has changed so much, even in the last 4 years, which is so incredible to see.
Yeah.
But once we hit the 1 year mark of not being able to conceive, at that point, we had been on quite a few wait lists to join a fertility clinic, which, if you live in the city of Toronto or the GTA, it's incredibly hard to get into a clinic. So, I put our names on every single wait list I could get our hands on. And when we finally got into a clinic, it was in Mississauga. And I was working full time. It was in the pandemic. So, filming a national show, usually you go to the office, you film in studio. But because of the pandemic, we were filming from home. And as a result, the schedules were a little bit lighter. So I was able to go to these appointments without having it affect my job. But driving to Mississauga from downtown Toronto in the middle of a workday was a huge, huge load that I had to take on while diving into a new world. But I couldn't wait any longer. I wanted to get in with the first clinic that would take me. We were just so unbelievably excited and determined to have a family. And so I started going to Mississauga for fertility clinic appointments just to start figuring out what was going on. And it was incredibly isolating. It was really lonely.
Especially during the pandemic.
Yeah. I would go to these appointments by myself. My partner wasn't allowed to join. So you have this long 40-minute drive, trying to stay positive with your thoughts, which is terrifying on the best of days. And, I was like, okay, here we go. I guess I'm going to go to a fertility clinic. I guess this is part of my story now. And I thought, again, I think I watched too many movies, but I was like, but I'm going to walk in. People are like, hey, Chloe, it's so nice to meet you. Come on in. We're going to do this, and the other thing. Here's a tour. We're going to take really good care of you. And instead, I walked in and immediately you could feel the weight of the emotions and the energy of all the people working and all of the women and other individuals in this clinic, trying to get to their goal. And I walked in and I remember feeling like, ooh, like there was just a weight. And walking in felt very challenging because I really feel other people's energies. And it became very apparent in that moment that it was time to take my hat off, the one that said, I'm naive when it comes to fertility, and to be a student of the world of fertility. And walking in was a harsh reality. And again, I had a lot of hope that, they would do tests, we'd be able to figure out what was going on, and we would get to the finish line. And yet that was just the beginning of the story, because it ended up taking almost 4 years to, end up at this place with our beautiful baby boy, Gray, who's been the beautiful kind of addition to our lives that we'd always imagined. But it took, switching clinics and a loss to get here. But the very first step was at least realizing, A, this is really important to us. B, we're trying our best to not getting to the outcome that we want. So let's move on to C and, say hello to the fertility clinic system in this province and lean on the medical community system to get some clarity.
I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people, is actually starting at one clinic and then making that realization, especially if you don't have anybody sort of counseling you along the way as to where you should go and where a good fit would be for you. Because, that first clinic might be a good fit for someone and their particular issues. But for so many people, I feel like, at least in Toronto, each clinic has their subspecialty as to what they're like. One clinic might be really good at customer relations, and like the actual service is really smooth, but the doctors aren't quite as advanced. Or you might go to one where the doctors are phenomenal and the admin is a nightmare. And so you have to sort of decide the seriousness of what you need to have taken care of. And I feel like a concierge service almost would be helpful. But how did you determine that first clinic wasn't for you and that you had to move on? And was the choice to like start again almost as harder, at least in the experience of my patients, where they're almost like, they feel like all of the work that they did at the first clinic has been washed away, and now they're at square one again, and they feel even more isolated, even more at the starting line.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could say I didn't feel like that, but 100% I did.
Right.
I wish I could say that I switched to a downtown clinic just because of convenience. I didn't want to drive that far anymore. But unfortunately, it was as a result of a really uncomfortable procedure and aftermath that I realized I don't feel comfortable in this clinic. I don't feel heard by my doctor. It just didn't feel right. And I felt like I was not being well received anytime I spoke about anything.
Right.
They
like in terms of your questions?
My questions, but also the physical care. Right. I went in for a test where where they put dye. I'm blanking on the and they want to visualize everything that's going on. And I was like, okay, we got this. And my pain tolerance is not very high. Like I feel things, especially down there, in such an extreme way.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, like how painful is this going to be like, just so I can mentally prepare for what I'm about to experience. And I thought I was going to die on that table. The pain was so brutal. And they assured me that it would feel very minimal, that I would barely notice it. And I'm on the table and they're doing the test, and it truly feels like this might be it for me. The pain was excruciating. My body was like seizing and being relaxed, seizing. And it was in complete overdrive. My fight or flight mechanisms were through the roof. I was sweating. I was crying. I had a hard time verbalizing anything. And yet they just kept moving forward with the test. telling me it would be over in a moment. It would be over in a moment. And instead of it being over in a moment, next thing I know, the door is open. There's multiple people coming into the room, all looking at a screen. No one at this point has acknowledged that I'm not doing very well. No one has told me, hey, this is what's going on, so that we're actually going to have extra people come in. Are you comfortable with that?
Right.
A mix of men and women. And I'm actually very comfortable, in appointment settings with both, but it would have been nice to be like, hey, you are very exposed in this current moment. Are you comfortable with other individuals joining? But instead, I'm there in extreme fight or flight, excruciating pain. And now I'm very confused and feeling a lot of uncertainty about what is happening.
Yeah.
But because I'm in so much pain, I'm not registering a lot of what everyone is talking about. And I just keep hearing this word unicorn, 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 and they're all pointing at the screen. And then next thing I know, everyone files out. The test is done. Someone wipes me up and says, the doctor will tell you what's going on at your next appointment. You can leave. I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be upset or add more workload to the staff there. So I wipe up all the goo that's everywhere. I get dressed and I start the 40-minute drive home. I think, okay, well, I guess I'll find out next time we speak to our doctor what's going on. Again, it's COVID, so they're virtual appointments. So my partner and I, open our computer. We're like, you know what, maybe this is where we get clarity about what's happening. And the doctor, pops on. He's like, okay, great. It looks like everything went really well with your test. So we'll keep, trying to figure out what's going on. And again, I didn't want to be a bother. I didn't want to be a nuisance, but I had to say something. And I was like, is there any chance you wouldn't mind looking at the file once again? It felt like something was discovered. It felt like there was a lot happening. I would love some clarification on what happened because it was a great experience for me. And he kept telling me that the file said that there was nothing. Everything looked great. And I remember leaving that appointment being like, it just doesn't feel right. Like something's not right. So I sent an email and I was like, if possible, please just triple check for me that it's all good. Anyways, turns out he was looking at the wrong file. It was a completely different patient's file. And that mine, in fact, did provide some clarity as to one of the many reasons that we might be experiencing fertility struggles. And that is that I have a unicorn uterus. And like the realization of that was one thing, but the realization that this doctor, who was truly just like gaslighting me, telling me that I was wrong and that my instinct was wrong. He didn't even have my file. And then thankfully I ended up getting a call from another clinic. And that one I'm happy to name, the Mount Sinai Clinic. They took me in and I was so happy because yes, it was more convenient. No longer did I have to drive 45 minutes to and from my appointments, but I was also going to get to start over. And while starting over was very frustrating in the sense that I had spent months at this other clinic doing all of the preliminary battery of tests and that I was going to have to redo all of them because unfortunately in this province, clinics do not communicate with each other always. I was so happy to get to start over. I was so happy to get to shake that Etch-a-Sketch because my initial experience within a fertility clinic was horribly traumatizing. I needed to shake that off, start fresh so that I could really give this like the best shot, but also go into it with more of an open mind and with more positive energy because I dreaded all of my appointments at the other clinic because I didn't feel valued or important or that my thoughts or concerns, were being heard. So I didn't mind the do-over. I actually really, really appreciated it because I needed a new chapter in our fertility journey, even knowing that outcome.
Yeah, I love that you shared it that way, specifically because that is one of the hardest parts I'm an acupuncturist, but I very much have a bird's eye sort of what's going on in the GTA, at least by way of clinic. And it's so hard to convince someone that they deserve better care because ultimately fertility, although it's so hard and it's such a struggle, very few people don't end their journey with a baby.
Yeah.
So you don't want to start your journey and go through the journey of having your child making compromises constantly to yourself and to everyone around you, and not wanting to be a bother. You know what I mean? Like, you should never be put in that position where you feel like your needs, which are so real, like that story of you being in this fight or flight, like I'm literally hearing like alarm bells ringing as you were describing that. And then for that to just sort of go, vroom, and then for you to just be told to like clear out and like, we'll get back to you in a week. Like, it's just,
And you trust.
and you trust, and it becomes the norm.
Yeah. And having gone through what I've gone through, I can sit here with hindsight and feel pretty confident that I wouldn't have handled that situation the same way today as I did then. I think today I would have said something, asked more questions. But early on,
I don't know.
you don't know, and you trust the medical system. And for the most part, they really do have your back. And for the most part, they do a great job. But, like any industry, they're overworked, they're probably underpaid, they're understaffed. And sometimes that leads to either, poor customer service, lack of information getting disseminated, or really important things falling through the cracks, like looking at the wrong patient file. But at the time, I just remember feeling so vulnerable and so small that I just wanted to make myself as small as possible so that no one would notice and how much pain I was in. And I just couldn't wait to leave and go home.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I did go home.
Yes.
And thankfully, we went to a new clinic.
Yes.
So there's a silver lining. That was me.
But if anyone takes anything from even just that portion of your story, it's that you can start again. There are so many options, and there is a better choice if you aren't comfortable where you're at.
Yeah.
So you get to Mount Sinai, you do a battery of tests. They give you like a breakdown of what they think is going on. And did they think it was mostly just like a structural concern with regards to your uterus?
So they thought that was part of it.
Right.
Essentially unicornuate uterus is like a big umbrella term for uteruses that are shaped different.
Right.
And mine was definitely it's half the size of what it should be. One of my sides does produce eggs, but they don't always drop. There was a lot of factors that they were like, this could probably amount to it. But at the same time, it's not going to be impossible for you to get pregnant. It's just going to be much harder.
Right.
But essentially, if anyone gives you a diagnosis of unicornuate uterus, do not Google it, because the internet will tell you you're never going to get pregnant. You're forever only going to have miscarriages. So you might as well just put that dream on the back burner. It's not worth it. And I strongly advise anyone who's been given any type of diagnosis to do not lean to Google. We all do it, but sometimes it is the underbelly of the internet and will spark so much fear and concern.
Yes.
So they thought, that was going to be a contributing factor, but we were basically told you have unexplained fertility.
Right.
And so we still to this day don't know exactly why it took so many months and 3 rounds of IUI and 3 rounds of IVF and 1 miscarriage to get here. And as someone who loves details and information and facts, I wish I had a reason as to why it was so challenging for us. But if I've learned anything throughout this is that it's not, and you're pregnant, there's so many things that have to go right to get a beautiful little baby into this world. And we just unfortunately were told, you just got to keep fighting the good fight and keep showing up and keep trying every single month. And we tried and we did. And some months were easier than others. And I think the thing with fertility and infertility, even now looking back on it, I still think one of the hardest parts of it is the duality of it all. You are living a double life when you are going through fertility treatments.
Well, I feel especially you, because you were in such the public eye. And people would have been perceiving one thing, and then you would be having to go home and like go to the clinic and be a completely different version of yourself.
It was the ultimate roller coaster ride of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't I chose not to let my employers know for a little while because I knew I was going to be able to balance all the appointments with my full-time job. Those 6 a.m. appointments, your girl was there. And it was great. It was great. I found a clinic, and you go back to finding clinics that work well for you. I really wanted incredible quality of care, but I also needed appointments that fit within my life.
Yeah.
When you go through fertility, you live at the fertility clinic. You are there multiple times a week. For us, it was years on end. You get to know everybody really, really well. It becomes a huge part of your life.
Right.
And I feel very lucky that I was able to find a clinic and get into a clinic that the appointments fit into my life rather than having my life fit into the fertility clinic.
Right.
I didn't want to have to sacrifice my job or my passion projects or my relationship as much as possible to make these appointments work.
Right.
And so if it meant waking up, before the rest of the city to go and get them done, that's what I did. But I would have to go and then have a job that was very public facing, and then go home and then have to deal with the ramifications and the emotional, mental toll that fertility treatments have on you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was truly the hardest part, was on those harder days, when you find out that it didn't work, or your lining's not thick enough, or your period arrived, or you just found out, you didn't get the test result you were hoping for, to then go show up, host a national show, and have to keep all of my personal emotions kind of really deep down so that I could hold space and interview people, and hold space so that other people could shine, and, we could hold a spotlight for them. And that part was really draining. It was incredibly draining and really isolating because no one knew.
What made you decide that you were going to start opening up about it?
To be honest, if I could have hidden my pregnancy until the baby arrived, I think I would have.
Right.
It was so hard to get pregnant and to stay pregnant. And I was way more terrified of having another miscarriage than I could have realized and anticipated. That I wanted to keep the knowledge that we were pregnant so close to our hearts for as long as possible, almost trying to protect it from any outside influence, outside energy, outside anything. It was this beautiful ball of energy that I just didn't want anyone to know or have a part in. Just wanted Ben and I to be able to hold it just in case we lost it, because the loss of, our first IVF transfer that we sadly did not see through, it was so heartbreaking, and that loss was so debilitating, and I still feel it in my bones today. I didn't know if I could go through that again, but have other people be involved. Even though the people that would know and that I would let in, friends and family, they have the best of intentions. When you let friends and family know that you're going through this, they want to check in on you because they genuinely care.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to make sure you're okay, and that, if there's anything you need, they've got your back. But what I think people don't realize is when you are that person checking in on someone going through fertility treatments, you might have the best of intentions, but the person receiving it, they might not be in a place where they're ready to receive that well intention. It might actually be incredibly triggering for them. And that's what I was afraid too, of people who I love, who I know love me, calling and asking, hey, how's it going? How's the pregnancy going? Like, what's the next appointment? Because I didn't know if I was going to be in a position to receive it, or if I was going to be triggered by that, or if I had a bad day, would I be able to tell them, or am I just supposed to be happy and grateful all the time? So we kept it really private. And I really only went public when I absolutely had to. And that was when I was showing. But then something really beautiful happened. I was so scared to go public because, again, what if we lost this baby as well? And what if I had to go through all that again, but now with other people knowing about it? When I finally went public and told friends and family, and then eventually the rest of the team, I actually felt so much lighter.
Yeah.
I felt so much more excited. I actually, for the first time in my pregnancy, was allowing myself to feel the joyous element of being pregnant instead of the anxiety-induced fear of having another miscarriage. Up until that point, I was living in fear of losing another baby. And instead, what happened when I went public is I was giving myself space to feel excited because everyone else was really excited. And it almost gave me, validation that it's okay to be excited about this. It's okay to feel joy while being pregnant. It's okay to still be concerned about, yes, maybe having another miscarriage, but it's also okay to have hope. And it's also okay to think, hey, this might actually work out this time.
I hear all the time people are like, well, I'm just going to tell everybody because if I lost it, those would be the people that I would want to tell anyway, or who I would want to be supportive, and I always, prior to my last miscarriage, would have said, yeah, absolutely. Like that makes a ton of sense. And then when I had my last miscarriage, I wanted to bring awareness about it. And in doing so, invited then all of these people to ask me about it, which again, as you said, they all had the best intentions. But then you're reliving it
all the time,
again and again. And so from the fertility perspective, I've actually never thought about it that way. When you're asking people about, what's going on with your fertility and how can I help? How can I be there for you? Then the person involved has to reiterate sort of again and again and again and again, oh, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Like, don't worry about it. Yeah, things are going well. Or, things are not going well. And I really didn't want to talk about it. I kind of wanted to be here at work to ignore it. But now we can go forth and discuss this. So I think that's also a really helpful tool for everybody who's listening, that they can, it's about how you check in. Like, how would you want people to know that you were okay without, what would be the best way for someone to show that they love you and that they care about you without asking and sort of getting into the nitty gritty of what you're going through?
No, I think that's a great question. I think even when I was going through my fertility struggles and finally pregnant, I am still a person beyond that. Like the Chole I was before getting pregnant, she still exists.
Right.
And I think that's something that I struggled too when I finally got pregnant, is all of a sudden, especially when people find out about the fertility struggles, every conversation was about how we got here. How are you feeling? How's the pregnancy? And while that was so beautiful, I also felt a little bit like the rest of me was less important and less valuable, and that my other interests and, things that I brought to the table were deemed kind of down here while the pregnancy was deemed up here. So I think something that might be worth considering for other people who do want to check in on their loved ones who might be going through it or might be pregnant is reach out to them, but maybe just talk about something that actually has nothing to do with their fertility struggles or their pregnancy. And the person on the other line will probably bring it up if it is something that they're down to talk about in that day. As a pregnant person, if you're having a great day, it's going to come up in conversation. How excited you are, how you're feeling, what you found out at the last appointment, the kicks. And if you're going through a fertility journey and you're in the thick of it, again, if you're comfortable and it's something you feel safe to talk about with whoever's on the other line or whoever you're having coffee with, it will come up. So I think it's almost like by checking in on the person that you love, just about something you would talk about them with before they were trying to get pregnant or before they were pregnant, kind of gives them the space to talk about it themselves. And if they talk about it themselves, then from my perspective, I feel like it's fair game.
Right. I love that. You're checking in on the person.
Yeah.
Not checking in on the journey.
Yeah.
I like how you changed it from struggle to journey.
I know.
That was good.
I know.
I love that.
Okay. Mindset shift. Try to be positive, Anne.
Swift.
Try to be positive.
Oh my God. Okay. I love that. Are you okay to discuss more of the actual medical aspects of the IUI turned IVF?
100%.
So when they opted, they were like, okay, we've tried the timed intercourse. That didn't work. Now we're going to move on to IUI. Did they say we're going to try IUI because it would be helpful to facilitate this, or this? Or they were just like, this is our next step.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to that.
Also, timed intercourse.
Yes.
Not sexy. Hey, it's not a sexy part about baby making.
I don't know. I hear timed intercourse and I'm down. Let's.
Oh gosh, I hear timed intercourse and I'm like, oh my
5
Good.
o'clock. Let's do this.
You block it out. You put it in your calendar.
That's right.
Yeah. So timed intercourse was not working for us. We tried, we gave it a good old college try.
Yes.
And had a lot of fun doing it. But just didn't give us the positive. I peed on so many ovulation sticks and it would never give me a positive little happy face, even though I was following, every app and measuring my temperature and doing what the doctors were saying. And so
I hate the smiley face.
Yeah, it's
offensive. It's honestly.
I thought I got one once and I looked at it too quick.
And it was gone.
Yeah, and it was gone. And I was like, I swear I saw
then your happy face was gone as well.
I also have smiley face tattoos. I've got multiple of them on my body. I actually really love a smiley face. Don't love a smiley face on an ovulation.
No.
Little stick.
No.
So that didn't work. So finally, once they had done the initial battery of tests, that was when they suggested that we try IUI. Because at this point, we had been trying quite a long time unsuccessfully. And the IUI, I thought, this is going to be great. This is going to work.
Yeah.
They're going to wash the sperm. They're going to choose the best swimmers. They're going to monitor my lining. I'm going to take the medication. What could go wrong? Lining is thick. Sperm's awesome.
Right.
Like, let's go.
Yes.
And only to find out, and we did 3 that didn't result in a baby, that sometimes it can take 5, 6, 7 IUIs before you get a positive test. And I remember once I finally learned that information, asking the doctor, like, how do we fast track to IVF?
Right.
Because the disappointment of IUI not working was mounting.
Yeah.
It's like every time we tried and it didn't work, the disappointment was compounding.
Right.
And to know that we maybe would have had to try 4 more times to maybe get a baby was just math that my brain didn't want to compute.
Yes.
I also found IUIs incredibly painful. And again, everyone that administered an IUI had a conversation with me about IUI from the medical community, told me it's not going to hurt.
Right.
And I just wanted to advise like anyone who's listening that you got to take that with a grain of salt. Every single body is different. And as a result, you will feel differently when they do the procedures. My body did not react very well to anything being inserted from a medical perspective, only to learn that my OBGYN educated me and basically told me I had what's called vaginismus, which is, some people get it as a result of sexual assault. It's a trauma to the vagina and their body reacts in a fight or flight when it feels that trauma is being brought back. And for me, after doing a lot of work, it turns out it was that initial test at that first clinic that went so poorly wrong.
Yes.
That was the trauma that resulted in my body really struggling to allow the medical community to be involved in my fertility journey without me feeling such extreme pain.
Right.
Which I only learned about at the tail end of our fertility journey. And had I known about it earlier, I would have done a lot of work to make sure that going into those spaces, going into IUI, going into IVF even, that I would have been in the right mental state to be able to kind of take the pain that was about to be heading my way from the trauma, which was such a wild like realization, especially from like an education standpoint that I learned throughout going all of this.
Especially because, at least from my perspective, I always think of trauma as something that has happened a really long time ago.
Yeah.
Even though I'm only the tender age of 39, I would have, you know what I mean? Like those,
like when you were 10
that's
or 12.
Right. Those things that you've blocked out and you don't know exactly why you feel a certain way, but you do. But for it to actually have been recent, that makes so much sense. You wouldn't have thought necessarily that was what it would be, but of course, that's what it was.
At the time, I didn't know. So then I just had to accept that IUIs were once again going to be incredibly painful,
Right.
that I would end up drenched in sweat, would need to bring a change of clothes, that I could go to work after because my body would just go into such extreme fight or flight. And again, if you're listening to this and you are someone who feels pain when medical procedures like IUI or IVF happen, what they ended up doing for me was using a pediatric catheter and also what was the little clampy thing?
Like the you mean for
You know, they
for the
spread it
pap?
open. Yeah.
Speculum?
Speculum. Thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of trauma, I blocked off so much from my IVF.
Yeah.
There's something called a pediatric speculum. And it's just a smaller one, but it still allows them to gain access. So there are options out there. So again, just advocate for yourself. If something doesn't feel right and it goes against what they're saying most individuals feel, it's worth sharing how you're feeling with the team, because there might be solutions to help, remedy a little bit of your discomfort.
Like, especially if something's so sensitive.
Yes.
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 I liked the puppetry there. I knew where you were going with it.
I know, if I never have to do one of those. Little guy.
So fun.
I know.
Got my pap coming up. I can't wait.
I know. No, we love a pap. We love a pap.
I'm going to be like, can we get started with this? My doctor's going to be like, I want you to find a new physician. Like, please stop.
You can just blame me. Had this chat with this weird girl.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah.
This, okay. So you did your 3 IUIs.
Yes.
We had the lining. We had the wash sperm.
Yes.
And it's still no bueno.
No bueno. No bueno. But I got to tell you, I was obviously incredibly sad whenever I got word that we were not pregnant yet again. But I had a feeling that IVF was going to be it for us. I had a feeling that was going to be how we were going to get our home run. I don't know why. And I was down to keep doing IUI, but I was very excited to get the call saying that I was finally off the list for the funded cycle of IVF, and that we could get the eggs and we could do like the most scientific implantation possible.
Yeah.
Like, I really just felt in my heart that was going to be how we got our baby. And so I did the IUI. We did all the things. We took care of ourselves. I took the medication. I suffered through the pain of the IUI. And while, yes, I was sad when it didn't work, I really just wanted the call for IVF. And when we got word that we were off the list, I just couldn't wait. And I could not wait to get to the place where we could do the egg retrieval and they could put those little cuties back into me.
Little freezies?
Yeah, little freezies.
Love
just
'em.
put them in there. And I knew there was no guarantee that it was going to be on the first try. Like, that was fine, but I couldn't wait to be in the world of IVF.
Right.
And I was so grateful when we finally were able to be in it.
I feel like that's a really important topic to delve into as well, because I feel as though a lot of my patients, at least, because I'm sort of in the alternative space, expect me to also be anti-IVF because it's such an amazing technology. And I truly feel like when people know that that's what's going to work for them, they feel really positively about it. For some patients, they're really nervous about it. Like, they're scared. They don't want to do it. And in that instance, I'm like, okay, like, I think people know themselves better than they give themselves credit. If you don't feel like it's your choice, like if you don't feel like this is good for you, like an appropriate choice. And I've had a few patients where I'm like, no, you have no tubes. Like,
you need IVF.
We don't care how you're feeling. You have to there's no way this will work. They're like, I thought you would. You're a witch. No, I'm like, no, the rumors are false. You need this. But I do feel like people, they really do know, like they get excited. I had one patient, she told me, I'm like competitive. I like can't wait to find out how many eggs they're going to retrieve from me. And I was like, you know what? This is a new take. I'm into it. I'm also competitive. Let's go. Like, let's see what we can do. But I love that you had such a positive, you weren't like scared. You were excited.
Oh yeah. I mean, before I worked in entertainment, I mean, this is a long time ago, I was obsessed with science. I have a bachelor's of science from McGill.
Right.
I was obsessed with science. And I still to this day, really, I have so much appreciation for the scientific community. I also have a huge appreciation for the holistic side as well. But I had faith in numbers and facts, and it felt right. So I couldn't wait. I didn't realize how painful some of the shots were going to be.
Right.
Didn't realize that, when we'd be traveling through Italy and South Africa, my partner would be giving me shots, constantly. And we'd, have this little secret behind everyone's backs that we would have to do.
Right.
But it felt really good to have such a specific, detail-oriented plan with lots of check-ins, lots of checkups. And then when that egg retrieval day finally came, it was such a celebration. And I was really hopeful that we had a lot of eggs. And, if I had kind of processed that if we didn't get enough, I would just do it again. I was okay with that outcome as well.
Right.
Turns out I made way too many eggs, like ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which was a little bit dangerous, but they ended up getting 21 eggs. And then by the end of the journey, we had 7 embryos.
Right.
So that was a little bit scary. They were quite worried about what was happening.
Was that from your first retrieval?
Yes.
You are an overachiever. I was astounded.
Yeah, my abdomen was incredibly distended from all of the inflammation and everything just being in
estrogen,
such intense overdrive. But it was worth it. It was worth the panic that caused. It was worth the doctors being very worried because we ended up with 7 embryos. And I was like, 7 feels good. 7 feels like a good number.
Yeah.
We'll get all this back on track.
Yes. George Costanza would agree.
We'll go back in size. Sweatpants are in.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Did you salt it up post retrieval?
Oh, I went and had ramen.
Right.
It was great. They were like, you can go have a lot of salt. I was like, did you say I can or I shouldn't? Because I think I heard I can go have a big bowl of ramen, maybe a bag of chips.
Yes.
And that was great. And I had to measure my abdomen like multiple times a day to make sure it wasn't becoming more distended. Yeah. And thankfully, everything went back to normal. But the one downside of making so many eggs, having ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, is that they weren't able to do a fresh transfer. I was really hoping, again, efficiency. I was ready.
Right.
I was hoping like take him out, make an embryo, let's pop him back in.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we were told once again we would have to wait until my body got back to a healthier state because it was just in way too much overdrive.
Yeah. Lining would have had way too much fluid.
Yeah, it would not have worked. Which now I understand. At the time I was very angry. I was like, no, we're here. This is great. Let's go. You know?
Yeah.
Why are we waiting?
Did you test any of the embryos?
So we decided not to test.
Okay.
If I were to do it all over again, we would have tested the embryos. At the time, we thought we had asked the right questions with regards to what the testing would tell us, and how it would facilitate what our next steps were.
Right.
Now that I know what I know, we were not provided adequate information or resources.
Yes.
And who knows, maybe if we would have done genetic testing, we wouldn't have had to go through 3 rounds of IVF. Maybe the first one would have been the lucky one. And maybe we wouldn't have had to have gone through the miscarriage had we done genetic testing, but maybe we also would have. But I think knowing that it just would have helped us, put the best one in at first.
Yeah.
I think I would do it now, knowing that, why not try the strongest genetic material? It's not to say that the rest are not great. I have a friend who did 3 rounds of IVF and she did the testing and they did the strongest one first, the second strongest, and then the third. And the third was the last one. And it was the one where they were like, test results weren't great. But she was like, let's go. And she has a beautiful baby boy and her life is amazing. And he's the cutest, silliest little boy you've ever met in your life. And according to the doctors, it wasn't a great test result, but it still was a wonderful baby. So that's the nice thing now that I know about it is genetic testing can just arm you with more information about maybe what the next step is, but it's not always fully conclusive. And sometimes the embryos are worth giving a shot.
Yeah. I like to say that I was probably a mosaic embryo. From
you?
I feel that in my bones.
You know what I mean? Like,
I feel that in my cells.
You got to take it with a grain of salt, always.
Yeah.
You always
or
really
multiple
do.
if you have OHSS.
Medical joke.
Yeah. I do like the one thing I will say, and I like that you were alluding to PGT testing helping you with your next steps, because the avoidance of potentially a miscarriage, but more so, I find that if patients have tested embryos and they are doing a transfer with a tested embryo, then they know if it doesn't work, then you're not going to have that conversation with your REI about, that was a tested embryo. Like, what else could have been a factor in that transfer not working? Because if the transfer works, everybody's like ecstatic and it doesn't even matter. But if it doesn't, then the next best thing is having a clearer plan. So like knowing, I transferred a tested embryo. Maybe it's circulatory. Maybe I need to look at how my immune system's functioning. Maybe I need to, get more clarity around what's going on in terms of like structural uterine environment, et cetera, and so forth. For you with your 7, did you how did that go? Did you do 3 rounds of retrievals or did you do
3 implantations.
Right, okay, you did 3.
That's too many.
3 transfers. I was like, what happened to the 7?
No, sorry, not 3 rounds of implantation.
Okay, I'm loving this.
Yes.
I genuinely was ready. I was like, we're on round
Apologies.
1.
Apologies. Also, side note, after the first round of the egg retrieval, I was hopped up on so many drugs because, again, the trauma, vaginismus, my vagina was just freaking out. I kept asking for more pain medication.
Yes.
So they topped me up to like the biggest dose they could give me for my size.
Yeah.
And at the end of the egg retrieval, did I not, and my partner was there and he told me about this, did I not sit up and give everybody a speech about how grateful I was to have gotten to know them and thank you for being a part of this experience. And I look forward to Ben was telling me that it was like this big formal like thank you speech. Like I was at an award show and they just presented me with something. And then he wheeled me out of the room and I waved.
Like the queen.
Like, so it's a good thing I only had to do it once because I think they had enough of me after just one.
I would want you back.
It was too dramatic.
Like immediately.
Yeah, it was much too dramatic.
Tell her she has to stay the night. Like,
yeah, it was, I slept real good that afternoon. I slept really well. So then we get finally, they do all the things, the cells divide, some of them survive. We end up with lucky number 7. I feel great about this amount of embryos. Then it's go time. My ovaries are finally back to normal. We've taken all the shots. My butt is bruised from all the progesterone and oil shots, but like we're feeling excited.
Yeah.
Then when I go in for the implantation and then I get the call after the 2-week wait, that dreaded 10 days, and they tell me it's successful.
Right.
I'm ecstatic. Like I'm so beyond ecstatic that at this point I feel like, well, for sure we're good. Like this is it. We're good. I remember getting the call. I was in the makeup room and just having to like keep that information to myself and just like, shaking in my seat. I was so excited. And my partner is an artist and he was painting in Italy and was, why don't you come? Like, why don't you come? Let's make a trip out of it. Let's celebrate this. Bring all the syringes, bring all the medication. Like, let's get out of Dodge and have some fun. Because it had been so stressful and so hard on a relationship for so many years that we're like, we need to let loose and have some fun again. Let's go eat pasta. Let's go eat pizza. And we did. And then we came home and I went in for my ultrasound. And that's when they told me I was going to be having a miscarriage. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me that just because we had a successful egg retrieval, just because we'd finally gotten to the point in our journey when it was time for an implantation did not mean it was going to work.
Right.
You can do everything right and still it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
No.
I just don't know how much longer I can do this.
Yeah. Another obstacle.
Yeah. And to this day, I've only had to suffer 1 miscarriage. And I know that is a very small number in comparison to some women who have to go through loss so many times. Once it's something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And it's something that I look at people and I'm like, I feel connected to you if I know you've been through that, because it is a loss that no one in this life can prepare you for. Because it's a loss of something that you have learned to love and spend time with and imagine your life with, and imagine how everything will change as a result of this life growing inside you, and then to have it ripped away and to leave the clinic with a little doggy bag with a couple containers and with, the team kindly asking you, do you mind collecting it when it passes so we can do testing?
Yeah.
It is a shocking, like, jolt to the system that rocks you to your core. And then you leave the clinic and you go, well, now what? Like, do I go home? Do I go to work?
Yeah.
Like, am I carrying this vial with me?
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know when it's going to
Yeah. And you're just
start.
like, I went from being so excited, so hopeful, so ready to just decimated
Yeah.
in a matter of moments.
Yeah.
And if you go to enough ultrasounds, if the vibe is good or not. Even though, at least in this province, technicians are technically legally not allowed to, discuss what they see with you. But human beings are human beings, and human beings have tells. Human beings feel things. And when people feel things, their body language changes, the way they sit in their seat changes, their muscles in their face changes. And you go to enough ultrasounds and you go through enough ups and downs, you pick up sometimes on what people are putting down. And I remember that day being there and being like, I don't think this is good. I don't think this is good.
Especially when they turn the screen.
Yeah. And they're like, oh,
They're like, can I bring in my partner? They're like, well, just wait till we're done.
And you just stare at the wall and you're just
like, this is going well.
And then the miscarriage happens, and it was horrific. The human body has to do what the human body has to do. And it is so incredibly visceral when you collect what is passing through your body and then to bring it and to drop it off. But then the part that I struggled the most with the miscarriage was going back to the clinic, back to this place that the last time I walked in as a pregnant person, ready for my ultrasound, ready to keep things moving. Let's get past the first trimester, to then walking in with the realization that, oh, I'm walking in as a different person today. And I'm going to see a lot of other people at the clinic who are maybe feeling hopeful, maybe feeling sad. And now I'm one of the sad people. Now I'm one of the people that, is not on the team I want to be on.
Yes.
And that particular appointment, I went in for an ultrasound. They wanted to ensure that the tissue had passed, and if next steps were needed, like a DNC or medication, or if my body was able to pass the tissue on its own.
Right.
And once again, I was presented with an individual who I'm sure is incredible at their job, maybe just had a busy day. And I walked in, and right away they were like, oh, Chloe, it's so great to see you. You must be feeling so excited today. And I remember looking at this person being like, I was like, I think you might be mistaken as to like why I'm here. And she was like, no, she's like, let's see how the little one's doing today. And I was like, I'm going to try not to be upset. And if I do, it's not directed at you. I was like, I'm going to step out of the room. And if you wouldn't mind just looking at the file and reading what's there, and maybe we can just start over. I was like, but I'm going to step out. I'm going to use the washroom, and I'll come back in 2 minutes. Because I knew if I had stayed, she was going to get a version of me that would have probably said some very unkind things, and she would have been ultimately a punching bag of my own emotions. And when I came back, of course she felt horrible. And I'm really proud of myself for like having kept it together. And
I'm really proud of you. I'm honestly listening to this like.
And I remember, I remember leaving. And again, she's so apologetic, but like I don't have the capacity to take her apologies in. Like I'm going through so much. I'm sorry, but like I just did not have time to feel bad for her mistake. But I did leave, and I was like, listen, I was like, I'm really upset by this today. I was like, but please like use this as an opportunity to just triple check before you welcome someone in, because that was really hard. And that was once again a reminder that like I'm not on that team today. I'm not on the we're pregnant team. I'm in the we're still not pregnant and I suffered a loss team. So just please, I was like, just don't let anyone else go through this, because this was already a really, really hard day. And I was like, oh, growth. Because I didn't know I was capable of handling that situation like that, because I was just so gutted already. And then to have been through that. So that was like 2 experiences in our fertility story where, I wasn't presented with the right information. And as a result, it was actually really painful.
I mean, how hard is it to read a file? I mean, I applaud you for your like growth as a human being. I'm listening to that just astounded. But at the same time, and this is in no way, again, I'm not trying to make this about like ragging on the medical community, but I will say, like, I treat a lot of physicians and they're always astounded by their experience in fertility in Ontario, because in their realm of expertise, like the idea of going into an appointment, for example, and not having read a file is unacceptable.
Yeah.
The one patient I have, she's an ER doc, and she was taking a lot of issue with the fact that, the length of time between tests like being taken and then test results being presented, it's longer in fertility than it is in any other field of medicine, and they get the results so much faster. Like, so it's not necessarily like a delay in the lab, it's a delay in the way that the clinics are being run.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for growth, and it's tricky because you don't want to be unappreciative, but at the same time, like, change needs to happen.
Oh, yeah. And I struggled a lot with that too. Like, again, at the beginning, I was saying I didn't want to be a bother. Like, so many experiences. And like, those are 2 small examples that really have hit home. But there were so many other micro examples of like, of days and experiences where I'm like, looking back, I'm like, how? But like, the system has to be better. There's too many things that fall through the cracks. There's too many people that need help. And there's just, everything takes much too long. Everything takes too long.
Way too long.
Yeah.
And it's just such an important part of like, not only your life, but your child's life, your partner's life. Like, so many people are affected. I mean, anyway, we will be better. This is step 1. So after your loss, you went and did another?
Oh yeah, I was right away.
Transfer?
Once I had to take a leave of absence from work. I really went into the depths of a dark place for about 3 weeks. I was catatonic. I was really, really not well. And then I started to slowly see the light again and feel better. And as soon as I started feeling a little bit more like myself, spoke to the team and I said, let's do this. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock. So we did another transfer as soon as physically I was able to. That one did not take. So that was January of 2023.
Right.
And that actually hit hard in a different way. I think I had thought, the first one did take, so maybe the second one will.
Right.
But unfortunately that one did not take. And I was like, at that point, I didn't know how much more I could do.
Yeah.
I was still reeling from the miscarriage. I was frustrated at the system of IUIs. I felt like I'd wasted so much time with IUIs. Second transfer didn't take. And I was feeling really raw. I was feeling really vulnerable. And I thought to myself, mentally, like my mental health was not in a great place. My anxiety was out of control. It was starting to bleed into my work world. Usually I'm pretty good at like putting on my mask, going and being the Chloe that people see on TV, and then dealing with my personal stuff on the side. But the worlds were starting to blend and mix. And now the emotional mental load was starting to affect my work. And I was just feeling it. I was feeling heavy and tired from the weight of how hard it was to get pregnant and to stay pregnant now.
Yeah.
And I remember chatting with my partner. We're like, okay, let's do one more and then let's see. And if the next one doesn't take, maybe we take a little break. We're really fortunate that we had so many viable embryos. Maybe we just press pause and try to have some fun again. Life became so intense and so serious as a result of trying to get pregnant. It was all we talked about. It was often what we did as a result of like medications and syringes and picking up meds and going to appointments, like our life was this fertility journey.
Right.
And it was starting to define us as a couple, and it took away a lot of our joy. So as we were leading to our third one, my partner's from South Africa. We scheduled a trip to South Africa to see his family right after that 2-week wait. So that way, if it was unsuccessful again, well, you know what? Let's go to South Africa. Let's drink all the wine. Let's go surfing. Let's just have a great time and just remember what it is to be us without this cloud over us of trying to have a baby. You know, like we so badly wanted to see sun, but it felt like trying to have a baby was this big, heavy cloud at that point. And then if it was successful, then amazing. Let's go to South Africa. Let's bring the syringes. Let's bring the medication.
Different tone.
Different trip. But let's go and we'll celebrate.
Right.
And so it felt like we were setting ourselves up for success. That no matter what the outcome of, embryo transfer number 3, I was going to have support regardless of what was happening. It was really starting to be very hard for me to live a double life. I was just very tired. And so we did it. And I went into that IVF transfer much calmer. I put a lot less pressure on it because I had kind of processed both outcomes at this point.
Yeah.
We'd had a successful one. We had an unsuccessful one. It was starting to feel a little bit less unknown to me, the extreme feelings that come with IVF. And that was our lucky transfer.
Yeah.
That was it. And so we went to South Africa and
didn't drink the wine.
I think he had
surf.
Didn't surf. I hung out and watched surf. Everyone was like, why isn't Chloe surfing? Chloe loves to surf. People were like, but we weren't telling anyone. And I was like, I'm a beach gal now. I'm a beach gal. I just want to be a beach gal. I'll let Ben surf. And it was a beautiful trip. I was very sick throughout all of it, but I didn't mind. I was like, I will be as nauseous as I need to be. Like, let's do our best to make this one stick. But while we were very happy and I was very calm and we were enjoying South Africa, of course, in the back of my mind was, am I going to have another miscarriage? And the am I going to have another miscarriage thought pattern and rumination made my anxiety, really, really unbearable most parts of most days. And while we were in South Africa, we hit the 6, 7, 8 week mark of the pregnancy. And that's when we lost the first one. I was not able to enjoy myself because I would convince myself that I was having stomach aches, or I would, the psychosomatic feelings I was feeling were very, very real and palpable. And rather than let myself sit in that, I went into problem solving mode with Ben, and we thought, okay, what can we do about this? We're not home. We're in a different country. Like, we don't have anyone we can talk to because we're keeping it to ourselves. So we did some research. We ended up finding a clinic and getting an ultrasound for peace of mind. And it was the best decision we've ever made because I was able to, thankfully, have an incredible sigh of relief. I was able to see the heartbeat for the very first time. The system there is very different than Canada. The doctor is the one who administers the ultrasound. It's in, one room. They talk you through it as you're seeing it. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful gift to us to be able to experience a surprise ultrasound on a trip for peace of mind, knowing that we had made it past the mark, that we had made it to when we had our miscarriage.
I love the fact that you were able to have that ultrasound in a totally different space, but also with information right away.
Yeah.
Because that's the worst part. Like, not knowing, like, what are they seeing that they're not telling me?
Yeah.
And you were able to get information right away. And so now you've had your son.
Yes.
You imagine you're like, I'm 9 months right now.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No. And
smallest person.
No, we have a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. His name is Gray. He's 5.5 months. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
He's been an angel. Is he still?
I know. No. Dad went and got him.
How did he know to get him?
I don't know. He just knows.
Like, it was like,
he just knows.
I expected a cry. There was no.
No, Ben and Gray, they're connected.
That was telepathic.
I know. He's a great baby, though.
Honestly,
he's so beautiful. And I think our difficulty in getting pregnant has made it so that I don't sweat the small stuff as much anymore. I'm still very much a type A person who likes to get things done efficiently, effectively, and with big impact. And definitely was a little bit more of a control freak before all of this. But I've had to let go a lot of control. I've had to lean into life. I've had to lean into roundabouts and detours to get to where we're going. But I think it's made me into a better mom now for Gray, because I look at him and I know that there's going to be hard times. Being a mom is really hard. The first 3 months are really hard.
Right.
But I've been through so much difficulty at this point that I know I'm capable of anything. And I just remember that when it does get tough, because motherhood is a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, it is wild, but our IVF story has made me into the person I am, has given me this beautiful little baby boy. And I just feel so, so lucky to finally be at the finish line, which is ultimately the starting line to this new
finish line, start line, to sort of not want to go back there and not want to discuss it, and wanting to kind of like, that was part of our story, but like bigger and better, let's move on. But you're just like, the fact that you're discussing it is creating so much space for other people to, even if they don't want to have the discussion with people in their life, to be able to listen to something like this podcast and relate with what you're saying, helps them feel not alone. And hopefully, if they're nervous about going the IVF route, they'll be able to take solace in, although it can be challenging, it can also provide you with like a lot of hope and a lot more certainty if you're the sort of person where that would be mentally and physically the best choice. Oh, I thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And don't be scared of IVF. You get to say a big speech after the egg retrieval.
I don't know.
Wave like the queen.
If we're all that articulate. I have been under, and there was no speech. It was like slurring. There was probably profanity. I probably was asked not to come back. Like, there was no speech.
Oh my gosh.
There was no waving. It was more of a like, please get her out of here immediately.
You're the best. Thank you. Thank you for having this podcast.
My pleasure.
I do. I think it's so important. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for having me at your house. I'm going to drop by all the time now.
Oh yeah, Also, Ryan behind the camera, you're invited too, okay? Yeah.